really in thinking about people who may be interested in the field or would like to learn a little bit more about it? Because just as any other one, like you said, you're not public facing. So I think one of the things that, you're in a laboratory and not a lot of people know about you and what you're doing. So I'm curious about what some of the more obscure areas within laboratory science that most people should be aware about, that these valuable professionals.
Yeah, yeah. And thanks for the question, because this is one that, when we're talking to younger people, but also the public, there are so many interesting areas that you just don't think about. And so one of the things I do as an educator, so I'm a community college adjunct professor, and I teach basic biology. And I do this almost on purpose as a way to educate. Every semester I can educate 25 to 30, younger kind of college bound students, and talk about not just medical lab, but kind of these tangent areas. For example, there are full career paths in things like in vitro fertilization. It's a unique area, and you have to kind of go a certain route to get there. You never hear about that in high school. You just don't. Are unique areas in cytogenetics, which is when you start thinking about a chromosomal analysis and doing certain assays to kind of help people predict inherited disorders, for example. That's aligned with the medical lab, but it's kind of its own lane. Cytogenetics, histology used to be part of our kind of area. Now it's its own certification. And so there are just thing after thing that students aren't usually aware of. When you're in high school, John, or junior high, you may have an aptitude for biology or chemistry, and that's awesome. You may have that aptitude, but what students don't know is often they're told medical school, engineering, nursing, veterinary school, these kind of tracks, and those are all worthy careers if that's what you want to do. But if you don't go that route, or you don't feel like that's going to work out for you because you find out, I really don't want to deal with patients, right? I don't want to work in that, but I love science. I want to work in the lab. Even in our field, within the medical lab, I always talk about it's really 4 areas. It's microbiology, which I love. That's my background, infectious disease. There's hematology, which is the science of red and white blood cells. There's this whole area that's looking at coagulation and blood disorders. I mean, it's so critical. You will want a specialist in hematology if you have blood cancer or you have some type of issue like sickle cell. And it's a ton of information, and it's a whole career path. There's immunohematology, which is a big word for blood bank. Probably the most critical area in the medical lab is, are you getting the right blood? Is it typed? Is it ready to go? It's truly life and death quickly with blood banks. And then clinical chemistry, and that's all the stuff around your, thyroid, and around your sodium levels, and around your cholesterol. So all those panels you see when you don't want to see them, when you're flagged for being high on your cholesterol or something. So you can specialize in these different areas. And then, we don't want our students leaving us, but one of the great things about our degree is it is a foundational degree for medical school. I've had alumni that are now pathologist assistants, physician's assistants, dentistry, veterinary school. I mean, so you can still go those routes, but what better physician than a medical lab scientist that knows all of the lab tests he or she may be ordering? We just think it's a no-brainer to consider our major. Again, we don't want everybody going to med school. We need people in our ranks, but we would rather you go do that with our background, because then you may be preaching about our field, and you're also going to be an advocate for our field. So just a ton of stuff, John. So I would always encourage students and family members to look at these career paths. A real simple thing you can do. I just did a talk for my school called "Get Your Careers in Gear: Health Majors You've Never Heard About." And so there are just Google it. Go to the Bureau of Labor and Standards, and you'll find all of these, like, what in the world is this degree? There's degrees in medical library science. where you can be a librarian that specializes in lit review research for science. I mean, these are great salaried positions that people just don't know when you're 16. So, it's really also something parents and teachers and advisors and others need to be thinking about when their children are kind of showing aptitude for science.
It's a really good point, and it kind of hits home for me because I have 16-year-old daughters, so I understand what you're talking
Send her
about.
my way.
And it's funny too, because it is that awareness piece, I think, that really again, because you are not out in the public, so to speak, people may not be aware as much about these types of careers, but I think it's important to really shine a light on them. And hopefully we'll be able to get to a place where more people are aware of this, and like you said, they have this aptitude for science and are able to help in filling these areas of need. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I'm curious about is how technology's affected laboratory science in recent years. Is it something where it's been a little bit of both, where it's helped and also made it more challenging, or is it really kind of helped lift the field up in terms of helping scientists in the laboratory?
Yeah, another great point. We get this question quite a bit. It is important. We absolutely need it. I mean, you don't advance any field these days without technology, and automation has become part of our world, especially in the areas of clinical chemistry and hematology. There's a lot of automation. In blood bank and micro, there's still quite a bit of subjective expertise surrounding technology in the medical lab. Really, the two areas that use it a lot, automation and other types of technology, would be clinical chemistry and hematology. There's been a lot of improvements in rapid testing, really quick turnarounds, which is what you always want for patient care. The sooner the better. Accurate, but the sooner the better. In microbiology and blood bank, a little more difficult. We have made really great advances in those areas, but there is some subjectivity to seeing things, and you might recognize that something like even a bacterial identification and resistance to antibiotics can be a little different. There's so many bacteria that sometimes you have differential similarities so close to each other that a machine can make the wrong call. And so again, I'm going to come back to our professional, and the major they go through is that you can't just expect someone to look at a machine and always take it for granted. You have to have a brain that's looking at that data, looking at the patient chart, conferring with the physician and going, this doesn't fit. This is not right. I mean, the machine's telling me it's Pseudomonas infection, but it's not right. It's not responding the right way. So that's the piece where it gets a little subjective at time that we think is part of our expertise in our major. But certainly the advancements in molecular diagnostics. I mean, we've seen it with COVID. Everybody is speaking about PCR testing nowadays, and that's great. I mean, they kind of have self-educated. We just need the public to understand that a machine can be wrong. And I think most of us that have been in the field long enough will never be comfortable with a totally automated system. You're going to need some eyes on it to do quality control and to, be the devil's advocate for the patient that this doesn't fit, that doesn't fit right. And so, and all joking aside, sometimes we have to remind our colleagues, nurses and physicians that, it's not working out. I mean, I know you want that test right now, but that's not fitting. That's not fitting the picture. We need to back up. We need to recollect a specimen, and we need to reanalyze, maybe by manual methods, to kind of figure out what's going on. So automation is absolutely critical. We have to have it to advance, but we have to make sure results are accurate at all times.
And just lastly, for you, Doctor, what are some of the aspects about laboratory science you love?
Yeah, so I think, again, as I mentioned, I came into this career as a public health professional because I didn't have the credentials right away. So I fell in love with the public health laboratory, including some time with the Department of Health in Austin and with CDC. I worked with rabies and hantavirus. I mean, I just fell in love with field work and setting up molecular diagnostics. That diagnostic investigative piece is really what I love. And then I was very fortunate 10 years later to have an opportunity to move into academia and kind of become a educator of the next generation of medical laboratory professionals. And I think what it comes down to for me is always about, the diagnostic detective work, whether it's public health and trying to identify an outbreak that's going on, which of course during the pandemic, that's been in my wheelhouse, night and day for 2 years. But even in the day to day and how our work absolutely impacts people's lives. You've seen it like never before. People need results. They need accurate identification. And in many instances, medical laboratory professionals, while not always seen, are absolutely critical to healthcare and to patient care. And I think, at the core of who we are, that's part of what we're proud about, is that ultimately we are giving that information that can help change a person's life. Sometimes it can change it in a way that's sad, because now they have an actual accurate diagnosis of some obscure cancer, but at least they know and they can move forward. So, we're there to create a treatment plan. We're there to identify things, and we're there to help our healthcare colleagues, physicians and nurses and others to get accurate results for the patient. And I think ultimately that's what most laboratory professionals love.